I don't think I've discussed this anywhere. I don't even think I broached this in my Security Breach versus Dark Revival story script, which is still being finished, but wouldn't do this topic justice. But I've got to say, what Dark Revival did with Bendy was probably the smartest thing they could have done with him. They basically had their cake and ate it too with this choice. And what is this choice, you may ask? Well, spoilers, but in this outing they expanded the Ink Demon's pretty much non-existent character not into one vessel, but into two. In an attempt to kill the Ink Demon, he was forced into the form of Bendy, a form that gave him emotions and empathy along with it, turning him into a soft and docile little toon. This would be Toon Bendy, or Baby Benders, a small and relatively harmless and helpful little guy who acts similar to his cartoon counterpart. After a rough first meeting with Audrey, Bendy runs from her for a while before eventually getting cornered on a rooftop, during which the two decide to team up, and it goes well for a while. As I said, Bendy is a helpful little scamp, except when it comes to scuffles, and he sticks around with Audrey for some time as she explores the city. And then the bomb drops. Shortly after meeting Bendy the first time, Audrey ran across the other entity in the studio, the ominous and malicious Ink Demon. He can show up anywhere without much warning. He eats his own worshippers, and throughout her travels through the cycle, he speaks to her through the ink. He threatens her, he warns her, he baits her with a truth she is not ready to hear, and all while he is still pursuing her. She is special, and for an unknown reason, she is his target. That bomb I mentioned is that Bendy and the Ink Demon are the same being. Bendy is a form the Ink Demon is compressed into, weaker and benevolent, but once outside the reach of Wilson's machine, the Ink Demon is off the leash. He can come out at any time. So let's go deeper into these two and how they differ. Bendy is friendly and playful, but especially timid. During his first encounter with Audrey, he is hesitant of her even before the encounter goes wrong. He's also capable of crying, something that will become important later. Bendy is also a little childish, shown playing with a train that he's protective of, assuming what they're looking for is going to be in the first thing they look into, and other little behaviors like that. Bendy cannot talk, so he pantomimes to get his thoughts across, like the classic cartoon he takes the appearance of. Considering that the Ink Demon can talk, it's unclear whether Bendy truly can't, or whether past events have rendered him silent, or if it was intended by Wilson, or if he can and he just chooses not to. By the way, the Ink Demon can speak now. Going into the Ink Demon, he is no longer the shuffling beast from the first game. While he is still a beast, no doubt, he's bigger, more threatening, and much more intelligent. His hunt feels less like a random shuffle and more like a pinpointed attack, and even though you can hide, if you're not hidden, he will get you, instantly. Save the few moments when the Ink Demon instead seems to just play with Audrey. Yet, what's peculiar is that while the Ink Demon does hunt Audrey, he equally shows some sort of attachment to her as well. It's hard to say what exactly, but things such as him whispering to warn Audrey of Wilson's lies and their encounter towards the ending, it is something worth mentioning. But how does the story explain the separation of these two forms? Well, the long and short is that the Keepers, formed lackeys, tried their hardest to kill the Ink Demon, and when it didn't work, managed to torture him to the point where he regressed into the smaller form. They were especially pleased with the milestone of making him cry and celebrated it. While Bendy was able to escape the Gent building where they kept him, he continued to swing back and forth into both forms. Now, Bendy and the Ink Demon are technically not separate personalities, in the sense that they are not free-thinking of one another. That could be why the Ink Demon initially becomes aggressive after Audrey accidentally hurts Bendy, who, noted, went through all that torture at the hands of the Keepers. See, the way the audio logs and his behavior lines up, it seems like what happens is that when the Ink Demon's form is altered, he might gain more emotional depth. He is capable of crying, and as we know from his time with Audrey, he becomes more friendly. He becomes benevolent, ergo, benevolent demon, aka Bendy. But this process, while understood, still raises some questions. Some questions that we'll get into later. Okay, major spoilers here, but towards the end of the game, after the final confrontation with the big bad, The Ink Demon finally catches up with Audrey, and she gives into being consumed. Though due to what she is, she becomes part of the Ink Demon and is able to take control long enough to reset the cycle. Now whole again, Audrey has come to terms with what she is and has taken on the role to build a better cycle for the others, including Bendy, who has shown to have not only become his toonish version again, but has been brought out into the real world. Now about those unanswered questions about Bendy. Well, that is actually a great mystery to keep open because as of the end of Dark Revival, it is implied that Bendy becomes our, or Audrey's, companion. In which case, here's where we go into why that split is so great. Because of the possibilities it can add to the next game, Bendy could be our ally, but his unstable half could still be our adversary, especially if this is accidentally released depending on something that likely Gent does. Or you could have Audrey teaming up with the Ink Demon proper, but just having this threat may be too big for him. Perhaps her efforts to make the cycle better, like letting Bendy stay little and sweet, has made it harder for him to unleash his dark other half, something he must do if he wants to free the cycle from its new owners. The possibility that Audrey unintentionally made this world a little more defenseless against this new threat. And here's a possibility. Bendy loves Audrey. Somewhat, from what we know. He's basically her little buddy, but the Ink Demon still loathes her. But over the course of the story, Audrey could bond with, or basically tame, the Ink Demon. Not to mention the bonding experience they had when they were quite literally fused together. As of right now, we have no idea what kind of effect that had on their relationship. Like I said before, the Ink Demon's relationship with Audrey is a little complicated. It's not clear exactly how he feels about her, except that in the ending, he sort of projects his own feelings onto her and kind of sees himself inside of her. In which case, it is possible that maybe this experience of bonding, even though she basically went against his wishes, could have given him more of an insight into what she's like. Or it could have just totally derailed any sort of relationship they might have had. But under the circumstances that they are under, I would say that the most likely outcome is that when faced with a threat like Gent, something else that's coming in like Wilson did and is starting to affect everything, likely the Ink Demon would be more prone to team up with Audrey, something that is familiar and is on the same level as him, than this unknown third party. How this could happen is because, unlike the last game, Audrey understands what the Ink Demon is, what has happened to him, and that at least part of him is her ally. So she must make the attempt to get through to him, even if unleashing him threatens her as much as everyone else. And you might say it's cheesy, but there's something else I didn't tell you, something that you probably already know. And that's that people love both Bendys, and they did even before the Dark Revival. People already felt sympathy for both. And the reason this decision to have both in one body was so great wasn't just for, story potential, but because it satisfied two sides in a way that didn't compromise who or what Bendy the Ink Demon is. Sure, the scary and threatening Ink Demon is cool, but I feel like nobody would turn down that tentative partnership aspect, especially if it encourages the game to make up for the loss of the Ink Demon as a threat by making something much more horrifying. Remember, the Gent building is where all the stuff went down altering Bendy. Maybe he doesn't still remember, but we know they're doing some dirty stuff behind the scenes. And when it comes to ink and machine monsters, the Keepers have given off how uncomfortable they can be. In which case, that's great for Bendy, because that would turn the main antagonist of the game, the face of the series, into the protagonist in a cool switch that I could see being very beneficial. Sometimes you have to give the fans what they want in a way that doesn't write you into a corner or limit your ability for gameplay. And let me tell you, this decision going forward with Bendy didn't do either of those things. Somehow, it really did have its big slab of chocolate cake without getting caught and losing its day job cleaning up ink puddles that run from the mop. Bendy the beloved toon exists. And so does the Ink Demon. And the world's better for it.